Thank you all for joining our webinar today. My name is David Flaherty. I'm the CEO of Magellan Strategies. Managing the webinar controls is Ryan Winger. This presentation is going to last about 20 to 25 minutes as we walk through the survey's findings. Please hold off on asking any questions until it is done, but feel free to ask questions in the chat and we'll get to those once I'm done presenting. If you are interested in downloading this webinar, as well as all of the other deliverables with this survey, they are available on our website. You can go to magellanstrategies.com, and up at the top, there's a tab that just says public polls. Click on that and you'll see this post. So with that, let's get started. Okay, what were the survey objectives? What were we trying to measure and understand from this survey? This was an internal survey done by Magellan Strategies. We paid for it ourselves, and we wanted to do a survey of parents of students who attend K through 12th grade in Colorado. We wanted to learn what was their opinion of how well their school performed in educating their students last year, as well as how it impacted their education, and then what are they looking for moving into the new school year regarding masks, remote learning, and so forth. Other questions revolve around vaccination requirements for teachers, students, and staff, and we have a couple of questions regarding critical race theory. How did we do this survey? What was the methodology? Well, we interviewed 516 parents or guardians of students. The margin of error on all responses is 4.31% at the 95% confidence interval. This sample was done by drawing a random sample across the voter file and then having folks identify themselves as a parent, attending a school in Colorado through K through 12. On the left-hand side is the text message and image that we sent to these folks, inviting them to participate in the survey. And as I mentioned before, if you're interested in downloading everything from this survey, the crosstabs, top lines, presentation are all available on our website. We also include in this presentation a map of the current congressional districts. Some of the slides do break out questions by region, and for region we use congressional district. So please keep that in mind. This map is for folks to know where each of the congressional districts are so that they can have a reference. We also asked respondents at the start of the survey whether or not they had one student or two or more students. To minimize any confusion, we let people know, please answer all questions as if you were thinking for your oldest student, if you have more than one. And this is just a breakdown where 52% of our respondents had two or more students, 48% had one student. And then we also asked them, what grade will your student be in this school year? And this is how it broke down in 4 education levels. 8% of respondents were parents of a kindergartner, 32% elementary school, 23% middle school, 37% high school. If you really want to get into the data, that's all in the crosstabs, and that is available. So feel free, if you're interested, of parents of just high school parents versus other education levels, feel free to look at the data that way. We also asked whether or not the student attended a public school, a charter school, a private school, or whether they were being homeschooled going into this year. 75% are from public schools or attending a public schools, 12% charter, 5% private, 5% homeschool, and a little breakout of what the other is on that slide there. Okay, our first question was pretty straightforward. Do you think the public schools in your area are headed in the right direction, or do you feel they are off on the wrong track? This is a very general question, trying to measure opinions of how parents viewed how their public schools were doing. 42% said right direction, 39% said that they were off on the wrong track, and 19% did not have an opinion. The voter subgroups on the right-hand side are clear. Democrats had a more positive opinion, feeling their schools are headed in the right direction. Unaffiliated voters and men and Republicans, not as much, where a plurality said that they were off on the wrong track. Other questions that were asked, again, this is the aggregation of this question by region. So if you're interested in that, I'm not going to spend a lot of time getting into the region in this presentation. But if you're familiar with the political leanings of these districts, it'll help you perhaps provide some more insight. When you ask a question like whether things are going in the right direction or if they're off on the wrong track, we always like to ask a follow-up open-ended question so that we can understand, get some qualitative data. Why do you think your public schools are headed in the right direction? And all of that data and these responses are available on our website for download. But here's the major themes. First and foremost, these parents were saying that schools are doing their best to meet student needs despite COVID-19. These parents are really supportive. They are sympathetic to what the public school system or their private school systems have had to face. And they feel that they are doing a good job trying to educate students in COVID. Other folks said that they thought it was going in the right direction because they prioritized in-person classes and learning. That's definitely a sentiment that is a majority of folks heading into this fall. Obviously, folks want that. Mask mandates or lack of mandates. What this survey really measured and picked up was among parents, there are folks that feel, I want our students to have a mask, regardless of age, if you will, and those that say, I do not think we want mask mandates in education. But the bottom line is it's a two-way street, meaning one respondent that's saying they are going in the right direction because I am somebody, let's say.
Hey everyone, I think unfortunately we lost David. I'm gonna try to, I've got the presentation open on my screen and I'm gonna take over from here. As we were, again, just going through these questions on why you think public schools are going in the right direction or off on the wrong track. Again, as David was mentioning, it's kind of a two-way street where it depends on whatever their local school district is doing and how they're handling the issues surrounding mask mandates. And so, again, on this slide where you see, are they off on the wrong track? Well, it's because people disagree with how they're handling it. They disagreed with the shutdowns and remote learning. But then you also see some non-COVID related issues in here where people are mentioning a little bit critical race theory or political agendas being pushed on students. A little bit also of schools are off on the wrong track because there's simply a lack of funding. And so, again, it's a mixed bag, and people believe that schools are off in the right direction, or off on the wrong track for many different reasons. And so again, we encourage you to go through these verbatims as much as you can. Next question we asked, and this is really just a 10,000 foot view of did you approve or disapprove of how your local school district addressed the coronavirus last year. It's got 53% approving and 40% disapproving of how their district handled COVID. Again, as with so much in this survey, we do see a partisan divide there where Democrats are mostly supportive, 70% approved of what their district was doing during the last school year, while only 37% of Republicans approved. Unaffiliated voters there in the middle are more split, as just over a majority of them approved of the way their district handled the coronavirus last year. And this is a slide that just kind of breaks out again by which grade their student was entered or is entering going into this year. And so you see not a lot of difference there, but among kindergartners, 38, 36, you do see that high unsure, no opinion. That's just because a lot of them did not have students in school last year. And here's the regional breakdown as well. Okay, Dave, are you back with us now?
I am. I apologize, everybody. Let's continue. We also asked parents, how their student school performed across the board in several categories. Basically, the very first one, or the one that where schools performed the best, was providing necessary technology for online learning. Parents clearly appreciated that. 29% said their school performed excellent and 31% good, followed by using health and safety measures to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Those were the top two, followed by communications to parents about their overall plans and procedures of what they're going to do. I know for many schools and for many parents, they may not have felt that they were getting information on a timely manner. But overall, the numbers were relatively good. The bottom, providing resources to meet your students' mental health and emotional well-being. That rated the lowest. Only 16% of their school performed excellent and 24% good, but yet 26% poor and 21% fair. With that said, mental health and providing mental health professionals in schools has been a very strong push for that over the last several years. I think, as many of you know, especially professional educators, and that many schools don't have the resources or those types of folks in place just yet. The second lowest category, providing personalized learning to meet your students' needs. That obviously makes sense when they could not be there in person, and assessing their students' progress in learning. So again, those are the categories how schools perform the best statewide versus those that performed not as well. We also asked student parents, among the following subjects, how concerned are you that your student may need additional instruction or attention in the coming school year? There's been a lot of news reports and discussion in the media about how students have tested very poorly, not surprisingly, in the last year, and how that many students perhaps are behind where they should be if there was no COVID. And we were curious, were there particular subjects that maybe needed more attention than others, but for the most part we tested 5 subject categories: math, writing skills, science, history, social studies, and reading skills. And we found that reading skills was the one that they felt that they were not concerned about at all. However, all 5 of those categories came up at 49% or higher of needing that someone was either very or somewhat concerned. We also had another option in this survey. There are other subjects that they felt that their students needed attention in: social skills, that makes perfect sense; foreign language; art, music, band, and choir. Okay, one bright spot as a parent or guardian of a student: do you feel that you were more involved with your student's education last year than before the pandemic? Not surprisingly, 61% of parents said yes, they were more involved. 35% saying they were much more involved. Rather than going through the motions of the typical school year, clearly COVID engaged parents to really have a hands-on approach to their students. Not that it was exactly welcome by any means of disrupting the system before COVID, but this is just one bright spot where 6 out of 10 respondents said, yes, I'm definitely more involved with my students. Another question that we asked, measuring the trust among parents towards different organizations and individuals involved in education. How much do you trust each one of the following to make good decisions about your student's school and education? With 5 meaning you trusted them a lot, and 1 meaning you did not trust them at all. And not surprisingly, teachers, parents, and principals scored the strongest on the trust measurement here. School district superintendent, local school board, Colorado Department of Education, not surprisingly, larger education organizations did not perform as well, with the U.S. Department of Education having the highest, second highest percentage of having no trust at all, as well as teachers unions. So we thought this was interesting, but again, who do parents really look for? Teachers, parents, and principals, and so forth. For the upcoming school year, do you think your student should offer both in-person and online learning, only offer in-person learning, or only offer remote or online learning? A majority of respondents or parents said that they would like their school to provide both in-person and online learning. We break this down by subgroup. As you can see, Democrats overwhelmingly would like both, where Republican respondents, on the other hand, or parents, were a majority preferred in-person learning. Again, we're trying to get a balance here of what may or may not be possible for each school or school district, but clearly parents would prefer a majority to have both options. And we would presume that is because, and I am a parent of a 10th grader and an 8th grader, just to throw that in there from personal experience, perhaps, that if there is a quarantine because a student does break out either in a grade or a classroom, the students perhaps will not fall behind, will be able to maintain their education if the school itself or the school district is able to provide both. And then we asked folks, how will your student be attending school this year? In person, full time, 8 out of 10 respondents. And again, we asked this question mid-September, 7% saying I don't know yet, 6% homeschooled, 2% part-time in person, part-time remote. Obviously, with the Delta variant moving through our schools and causing concerns, at least we know 8 out of 10 parents, their student was starting the school in person and full time. So, okay, do you agree or disagree with the following statement? All students in K through 12 should be required to wear a mask for in-person learning for the upcoming school year. Our state is, our parents are split. 50% disagree with a requirement for all K through 12, 48% disagree. Intensity to disagree is slightly higher than strongly agree, with 44% strongly disagreeing with this, 37% strongly agreeing. You can see the significant difference based on party affiliation, and a majority of unaffiliated respondents saying that they did disagree with this. Again, we are measuring the data here, so please understand that. But folks are evenly split, and there's a lot of correlation with party affiliation. Interestingly enough, among parents of kindergartners, the disagree level does reach nearly 60%. We think this makes ample sense. Many people feel that it's difficult for somebody in kindergarten or a student in kindergarten to learn with a mask on, and perhaps they are less likely to contract the COVID virus. And again, it's just an observation. I don't know that. We don't have an open-ended question following up on this, where perhaps elementary school and higher, the numbers are more balanced. Okay, requiring teachers and staff to be vaccinated. Do you support or oppose a school policy that would do that? Again, the state is relatively split. A slight majority do support this policy, both on intensity at 43% versus strongly opposed at 39%. It's pretty even how people feel about this, and not surprisingly, there's, again, political undercurrents going on here, where 70% of Republicans oppose that, 82% of Democrats support it, and unaffiliated voters are relatively in the middle. So again, it's pretty straight down the middle. Mask wearing, K through 12 mandates, as well as requiring vaccinations for teachers and staff. And then here's the data by congressional district, and I'm just going to go through that later or further on if you're interested. Okay, then we also ask folks for the following levels of education. Please indicate if you support or oppose requiring a student to provide proof they are vaccinated in order to attend school in person. And again, our state is very split, so that for a middle school student, 6th, 7th to 8th grade, 44% support that, 52% oppose a policy such as providing proof to attend in person, and it's very similar, obviously, for high school as well. Intensity on both of these is stronger. 47% on both high school and middle school strongly oppose requiring to provide proof of vaccination, where the support levels is a strong 1/3 after that. Okay, another question, regardless if you are a parent or guardian of a student who is 12 or younger when the coronavirus vaccines become available for children aged 12 or younger, would you get your child vaccinated? 54% of respondents said yes, they would. Overall, 47% said yes, and right away. 7% would say yes, but not right away. 32% said no, 9% unsure, 5% refused. Again, looking at the subgroups or the major subgroups here, you can see a majority of Republicans would not get their child vaccinated, where nearly 9 out of 10 Democrats would. Unaffiliated voters, a plurality said yes, they would at 47%, and 38% would say no. So again, as the public debate goes on about encouraging vaccinations, this is a little bit different sort of question regarding children 12 and under. And again, we're just reporting the data. Okay, another question, how necessary are the following options for you to feel safe sending your students back to school? What makes a parent really feel safe? First and foremost, top of the list was schools requiring students and staff to quarantine for at least 7 days if they are exposed to someone who is tested positive. Obviously, quarantine policy is extremely important and at the top of the list. 41% of respondents said that's very necessary, 29% somewhat necessary. What was the least, option or thing that needed to be in place for them to feel safe to send their kids back to school? Schools staggering schedules so that there are fewer students in classrooms and desks that can be spaced 6 feet apart. Half of people said that was not necessary. 50% said it was necessary. But the largest one, 54% of folks saying something was not necessary. And again, this has some political undertones to it about just getting vaccinated or not. Schools requiring all students to get the COVID-19 vaccine, 30% very necessary, 14 somewhat necessary, compared to 54% saying that's not necessary at all. Okay, and as we get to the end of our presentation here, we always ask in our education surveys questions about funding and so forth. We just wanted to ask this one in the COVID era, if you will. Do you think public schools in Colorado are underfunded? The majority of all subgroups agree. 63% overall believe yes, they are underfunded. 22% said no, that they were not. This is the data by congressional district. I'm not going to get into that, but it's just clearly to know that the lowest percentage of yes was in CD6, but there's overwhelming support. People believe that. But then following up to that, we do a lot of ballot measure surveys for school districts as well as special districts and municipalities that have to go to the ballot for funding. Would you vote to support a modest tax increase to help fund your local school district? This is an undefined tax increase. When you do put in the actual numbers, be it a property tax for a capital project, a sales tax of some kind of like teacher salaries. But again, 58% said yes, they would support a modest tax increase. This is the breakout by party affiliation as well as some age groups. The intensity is definitely stronger on the yes side, 41% definitely yes, 22% definitely no. And remember, this is among parents, this is not among voters. So please keep that in mind. And then that's the data by congressional district. Okay, critical race theory. Critical race theory has gotten a lot of attention over the last few months, and I think everybody's aware of that. When we asked these questions, we did not define what critical race theory was. We were more interested in understanding what people thought it was, because we have a belief that many people think it's one thing or not, let alone what they know about it. And the first question we want to ask, how familiar are you with the concept of critical race theory in schools? 41% said very familiar, 30% somewhat familiar, and 12% not too familiar at all. But 7 out of 10 respondents felt that they were familiar with critical race theory. And then we did an open-ended or insert an open-ended question because we wanted people to explain, and being descriptive as possible, how would you define critical race theory? What is it? Here's the major things that emerged. It's a tool for re-examining history and society using race. Some people said it was left-wing propaganda. Some people said it was discrimination against white people. And then there were other comments regarding the idea that racism is built into laws and establishments. If you are interested in opinions around critical race theory, I encourage you to download these open-ended verbatims and really get a sense of how people are viewing what it is, and understand that we did not then go ahead and define it for them. Our purpose in this research was to measure and understand what they thought of it, what they thought it was, and then simply, what's the main point of critical race theories? Do you think it should be taught in schools among parents? And we did not define it for them. So please keep that in mind, whether or not critical race theories even is in school. So please keep these questions into context of what we are attempting to measure here. We were not trying to educate and inform. We were only trying to measure current opinion without swaying that opinion in either way. 37% do support critical race theory being taught in schools, 45% oppose it. Intensity is more on the opposition side, 39% strongly oppose. And the breakouts to the right, you can see by larger voter subgroups. And then here's the data by congressional district, and you can feel free to review that as you download and review that. So with that said, I'm happy to take questions now. I apologize again for our disruption. So with that said, Ryan, feel free to ask any questions.
Yeah, let's see if anyone either has a question in the chat or raise their hand, however you all want to do it.
Don't be shy. I know this may be a survey that's sort of around the edges on a lot of topics that we felt were relevant. So Okay, so we have one attendee, Frida.
Yeah, Dan. Dan, I just gave you permission there if you want to go and ask your question.
Perfect. So my question is around the quarantines. I saw a lot of support for that
Yes.
in the data here. When was this survey done? I might have missed that earlier because
It was done from August 8th to the 16th, Dan.
Okay, cool. I'm only asking because there's been a lot of data prior to that, and I'm kind of curious what if that had changed it, because I don't feel like it's well known. So I appreciate it.
Sure, absolutely. No, I mean, obviously quarantines was the number one thing that made parents feel comfortable in sending their kids to school. So, we're not professional educators here, but in the education space, clearly having a quarantine policy is top of mind for parents. So,
Thank you.
yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I also got a question from Mary here. These results seem to split almost evenly down on party lines. What does that mean for the future? So I guess you can speak to that a little bit, and I can as well, Dave.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Well, I just think it is, you're right, Mary. It's not very often that, especially here in Colorado, we see an issue that is so starkly split. And so yeah, I think for at least the immediate future, it means that we are going to see just kind of these heightened passions, like I'm sure some of you saw at the Douglas County School Board meeting last night. I think, unfortunately, that's going to kind of be the norm, where you do have very outspoken people on both sides of this issue. And really, I don't see it resolving itself until we get to a little bit more of a normal place on COVID.
Yeah, and I would just follow up to that it will remain split. I do think it's unfortunately part of the political discussion rather than even a health and safety discussion. But there's very hard opinions on both sides about vaccinations and mask wearing, and it's right down the middle among our sample. And our sample, we do have demographics in the end that talks about this, are very close, by the way, just so you understand. We didn't talk to a bunch of Democrats. We didn't talk to a bunch of Republicans. In fact, the party affiliation of these parents and guardians that we spoke to mimicked statewide registration pretty closely, roughly 25% Republican, upper 40 unaffiliated, low 30s Democratic. So, but I think this issue is going to be around for a while. And as outbreaks occur in schools and Delta is out there, it's going to be front and center. And I think we're also seeing in this survey a lot, especially with the verbatims, a frustration among certain parents that whether they just want to go back to work and get back to life to normal, and they're eager to do that perhaps, and I'm not saying they're willing to cut corners for the health and safety of their children in educating, but there's just clearly a lot of opinions in a very charged emotional environment going into the fall.
Yeah, Frida, I've just allowed you to talk, so you can go ahead and ask your question.
Was there anything about the survey results that surprised you?
Well, not on the mask wearing, not on teachers being required and staffed of getting vaccinated. From among parents versus where we look obviously at the registered voter population of Colorado very often, I wouldn't say that there's anything that totally jumped out at me. Again, this was an area where we're going into the new school year. What do you think? I think more than anything, one of the biggest takeaways that I found was just how many people really do want to have the option of both in-person and remote learning. I think they look at that as the best way that they can getting on with their lives is not the right term. I guess it's their kids will not fall behind if both are available in the case of a serious outbreak of some kind. I think that was extremely interesting. I thought that number would be lower than for having both, because some people would understand school districts may not have the resources, even though they've had perhaps arguably 1 year under their belt to adjust education to meet in the COVID world, that more people were still like, I want both. I thought those numbers perhaps would be lower.
Yeah, and I would just add, I mean, I think one thing that's surprising is it's not often that you see an issue that is so split down the middle as, for example, the mask wearing or the requiring of teachers and staff to be vaccinated, or really a lot of this survey that was pretty split. And I think, if anyone's been following Colorado politics over the last 4 or 5 years, really even decade, it's that a lot of issues unaffiliated voters tend to side more with the Democratic view of certain issues. Whereas what we found on this survey is that in a lot of cases, unaffiliated parents in this case are closer to the Republican viewpoint. So that's a little bit surprising. And it's something that I would be curious to kind of track as we move forward and hopefully get schools back to normal as they were 2 years ago.
I'm just looking. Go ahead.
Dacia has a question. Do you think this would look different since the Pfizer is FDA approved now? I do think that changes the calculus on some people's thinking about vaccine mandates. I know the reason why a lot of people were hesitant about vaccine mandates is simply because the vaccines weren't FDA approved. And so how can you mandate someone to receive a vaccine that's not FDA approved? I would imagine that might shift the results a little bit, but I don't think it would dramatically change anything that we're looking at here.
Yeah, I would agree, Ryan. I don't think it'll change much, very little. So, and I see some questions in the chat. Understand, everybody, you can download everything from this survey that has additional slides in it on our website at www.magellanstrategies.com, and just go to the public polls tab at the top. You click on that, and you'll see our post regarding this survey. Just click on that and you can download everything that is in there. We did not get into geography below congressional districts, so just please keep that in mind, current congressional districts. We don't have responses by county, just simply, 500 is not a large enough interviews. But again, this data is out there and ready for you to review however you want, all the crosstabs and everything.
Yeah, and everyone, just for your convenience, I just went ahead and dropped the link directly to the blog post in the chat. So you can click that and download the release as well.
Other thoughts, comments? We'd love to hear your feedback. We know we have some professional educators on the line. We have public health professionals on the line. Happy to answer any questions that you may have. Okay. Well, again, like Ryan said, he's posted the direct link in the chat. So if you want to hop in and click on that now, feel free. And Mary, thank you for that comment. These topics are timely. Thank you. We appreciate that. We thought it was timely as 900,000 students go back to school in K through 12 in these last few weeks and moving forward. And there's a lot going on. And so we were very curious to provide this public data on opinions around parents. And we're happy to answer any follow-up questions that you may have. And we hope it's helpful for you to perhaps get a little more information and data around how people are viewing things, how parents are viewing safety and so forth in schools. Okay.